Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Kara, the MC of today's event. The space industry has been a prominent subject around the globe for a long time. And I believe that we all share the same interest in the developing trend of space technology and the momentum of space business. That's why we are all here today. In today's event, we will have a very exciting and engaging discussion on the topics mentioned. We have lots to cover, so let's get started. Please join me and give a warm welcome to the host of the event, Paul Lee, Chief Administration Officer of ASVDA, onto the stage and give us the opening remark.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today is a heavy day because we invite very important people to share his experiences for us. I'm Paul Lee, the CAO of ASVDA, the Asia Silicon Valley Development Agency. I'm very happy to invite Mr. Sato to have this speech, and it's my honor to introduce him for all of you. I think this week is very lively and busy in Taipei because we have two very important events in Taipei this week. The one is Computex, another one is InnoVEX. Mr. Sato is one of our experts, 4 experts we invited from different countries to attend the innovation forum that we co-organized by SVDA. So because we hope to know what happened in different areas on the startups and innovation ecosystems. So we invite 4 countries' experts, including the United States, France, Japan, and Singapore. And Japan is one of it. Okay. Because Mr. Sato is recommended by Nomura Research Institute, that's a very important think tank in Japan. So when I received his recommended resume, I think, whoa, the person, his background is very special. He's not only an expert on startups and entrepreneur or innovation, but also on new space business. I think, whoa, new space business. I think this issue is very fancy and interesting. So I immediately decided to invite him to have a speech for SVDA during his travel in Taipei. So this is why he said here, okay. I'm very thankful for his help to have this speech. I think this is just a beginning of ASVDA to connect different resources to help our startups and entrepreneurs. Because ASVDA is a national level hub, I hope, is to be a national level hub to connect different resources and connection for our startups and entrepreneurs, help them to grow up. This is our purpose. So today we are very happy to invite Mr. Sato have an excellent speech for us. Now let us welcome him with our warm applause. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sato-san.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for the warm introduction. So, ni hao. Thank you very much. Great thanks to ASVDA to have me here at this wonderful setting. Actually, I was invited by my colleague in Taipei, and he mentioned to me by email saying like, government wants to meet with you to talk about space. That's all the thing I had from his message. So what I had expected was just doing some roundtable with a number of government people. So I wasn't kind of really much prepared for this kind of setting. So I'm kind of feeling really nervous now. But hopefully I will get used to this situation. So thank you very much for your time. And briefly, I want to talk about what the new space trend is about and what the actual business scene in Japan is going right now. So, okay. So this is who I am. Just briefly, as I was introduced, I'm a consultant of NRI as a senior manager here in Tokyo. And I actually wear double hats. On top of being a consultant of NRI, I also am also active as a CEO of a nonprofit called Spacetide Foundation. Spacetide Foundation was incorporated just 2 years ago. And as one of the co-founders, I am supporting all kinds of space startups as well as government, also legacy companies, whole players in the space industries, by hosting annual business conferences in Tokyo. The next one will be hosted on July 9th in Tokyo. So if you have any chance to come over to Tokyo then, we're happy to have you as well. So I also do like some consulting works with the government or companies or clients, and also join the government committee as advisory board members regarding space businesses as well as startup ecosystem of innovation. So I'll be talking about startup and open innovation ecosystem tomorrow at InnoVEX. But for today's talk, this is specified for the space business. So I just want to ask you, how many of you have ever heard about the word new space? Raise your hand if you have heard about new space. Okay, very few. Thank you very much. So literally, new space is new space. But what this actually means is the new momentum of this commercial space. So like wherever in the world, I think Taiwan is very changing rapidly right now, but in the past few years, Japan was facing the same situation. Space has been utilized only for military use or governmental use. Commercial space was not the actual industry then. However, because of a new space momentum, space industry becomes one of the profit producing industry like ICT or automobile or robotics or other ICT fields. Space is changing like a GDP contributing industry in Japan. So to talk about the overview of the trends of the space sector. So the market size is 4 billion yen, Japanese yen, and over 1,500 startups are emerging in the world. There's some reputation about Chinese startups because some of them mentioned we have 1,000 startups. So this number might be really varies due to the number of Chinese startups. But basically, we call it like 1,500 is the firm number of startups. And for the risk money involved in this industry is over 120 million Japanese yen. So it's a kind of big amount. And it's still growing. And I haven't covered very much all of the countries in this map, but we have many, we means space industry has many different countries getting into new space trend. Of course, US is one of the core or leading company of this momentum. And European countries are following it, but also Japan as a third peer of this industry flourishing in the new space. And we also have different newcomers in different countries. And I hope Taiwan is one of those. And in this APAC region, other than Japan or Taiwan, we also have, of course, China and Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. And a little bit far from the APAC, but India is going into the new space momentum. And if you talk about space businesses, many people think about rocket, launch vehicle, blasting off from the ground to the outer space. That's all about space. That's a very standard image of the space business people think about. But as an industry as a whole, space is not all about rocket. The rocket is just a transportation method. The way rocket is doing, bringing satellite into the outer space to the Earth's orbit, and the satellite functions to bring some values to the ground businesses. So as I wrote down here, satellites have different kinds of satellites. Basically, we have three types of satellites: remote sensing, telecommunication, and location business satellite. And of course, there are the ground-based businesses a lot dealing with those satellite data. So in this situation, ICT business comes in, collaborate together with space businesses. And of course, space is not all about Earth's orbits. And you also have International Space Station, ISS. Over 10 countries are dealing with this station operating together. And after 2024, the government operation will be ended. And then there's some controversy, but it is expected this facility will be operated by the private sector somewhere in the world. So every startup, especially people in Silicon Valley, is eager to make something new in this ISS for business purposes. And also, there should be some space travel kind of thing. Very famous company called Virgin Galactic, founded by the Virgin Group CEO, Richard Branson, is working on the space travel businesses. I think the initial travel by himself will be operated this summer, hopefully. And also, of course, space has other planets, like Moon or Mars. The US is pretty much engaged in this planets in development. Moon is one of the core targets of their space programs. And NASA is not the only player who were working on this moon development. They really wanted private sector to get involved in this moon development. So like famous startup like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and even from Japan, iSpace, one of the moon exploration company, are involved in NASA's program. So there is a kind of like a private-public partnership programs a lot. And some of the billionaires, entrepreneurs, the final dream is to live in Mars. So they're spending the money developing high-tech infrastructures to make their dream happen. So if you talk about space companies, historically, these are the legacy companies in the three of the main countries areas in the space industry. So for the US, I think one of the most well-known companies is Boeing, Lockheed Martin. They're the two majors of the launch vehicle companies. Most of the government contracts were dominated by those two giants. And for a satellite, Digital Globe, they have really very high-end, high accuracy remote sensing satellite. They also have a huge contract deal with the government. And Europe, Airbus, they're also a giant competing with the US. And from Japan, you might have heard about Mitsubishi Heavy Industry, MHI. I think they have a big business here in Taiwan as well. So we have like 4 legendary legacy companies. This is, some people may call like old space, but I don't want to say old space because it's kind of contains a sense of like insulting. So I would say call them established space. But established space is not the only players in the space industry right now. As I said, new space is coming in. And new space is the leading players who are changing the space industry as a real industry. And there's kind of difference in the status of the commercial space. Space, US is very going ahead. And following them, Europe and Japan is a little bit falling behind, but they're catching up. So this is kind of phase shift of the space industry. So originally, space business, as I said, comes out from the government contract. So basically, space development was operated by the government itself. And eventually, they asked private sectors to join in the government projects to make some launch vehicles or satellites. And nowadays, especially in the US, private sector startups operate their own project by themselves. Sometimes government could be even just a customer of those startups. So the big shift has happened in the US. So the governments are no longer the only leading player in the space industry. Otherwise, they're just one of the players. So one of the breakthrough was brought by this company, SpaceX, founded in 2002. So it's almost like a 20-year company, 15-year company. And what they have done was all the breakthroughs. So one of the notable breakthroughs they made was reusable launch vehicle. So have you ever seen how the launch vehicle works of SpaceX? If you Google, not Google, how to say it, YouTube? If you search on YouTube, Falcon 9 reusable, you can see 1 minute or 3 minute video footage of this reusable launch vehicle. It blasts off from the launch pad and go into the outer space, and the first stage engine of this rocket comes back to the very launch pad in about like a few minutes. I felt like I was seeing like a videotape reversing, going back and forth. So this was really remarkable because the traditional rocket is just only one-time use. You have to abolish it after using it into the outer space. Although this is really high-end technologies are used to make it, to launch it, but you can only use one time. That's not the industry. It's not cost-effective. But Elon Musk, the CEO, founder of SpaceX, hit upon the idea to make rocket as a reusable thing, like ICT devices or automobiles, other very standard technologies, gadgets. So that's what new space is about. So we have to think about space is not special. Other than that, space is just a standard infrastructures should be used for the ground-based businesses. And they have kind of different structure type of business models. So like reusable rockets, they do have really firm business, but also they also have projects, kind of dreaming project, like living on Mars, or large rocket in the world, the largest rocket in the world for Mars or Moon. And recently, they actually launched 60 telecommunication satellites with just one rocket. This is called Starlink project. Finally, they will be launching, how many? 12,000 satellites into orbit to fully cover all of the globe to make a huge telecommunication network replacing the existing ground network for cell phone network or SNS or whole internet. So that's what they're doing. So basic infrastructure businesses as well as this kind of dreaming projects. So they're selling dream as well as money as well. And this is kind of picture how we have to understand what the new space is about. The triangle in the left is the existing established space or old space. So the top is the government. They have role as a leader of the space industry. They have a will and they have a program and they offer chances to the private sector to do their project, taking their money to this industry. So all the will and timeline will be operated by the government. So they are the lead. Instead, for the new space, everything has changed. So as I said, government is only one of the players. So every single player is in the fair trade relationships. So sometimes startup take the lead, like Elon Musk. Sometimes we have to talk about new regulation laws. So attorneys, legal players must be the core player to lead the new space industry momentum. Or sometimes other industries like ICT or automobile could be one of the leading players. Recently, Toyota, one of the legacy companies in the automobile industry, made a partnership with JAXA, Space Agency of Japan, to make a moon rover, the automobile on the moon, to run it in the 2020s. In that situation, not JAXA, but Toyota takes the lead of the moon's exploration. That kind of thing is happening right now. And the trend of new space has emerged from the US. So I just lined up the very notable US startups. They are not all of the startups, famous startups, but they're one of the first generation as a hero in this industry. So, as I said, there are different kinds of space businesses. There is one industry. And you might have heard about Blue Origin and SpaceX, but they're not the only players in this new space. So we also have satellite big players. Of course, you know Facebook, but Facebooks are developing their own telecommunication satellite as well. And you might be wanting to know about OneWeb. OneWeb is just a small company, only have 100 people in it, but they have got the funds from legacy players worldwide, like SoftBank from Japan or Airbus from France. They got huge funds from legacy players building a telecommunication constellation. Constellation is widespread total system of telecommunication like SpaceX or Starlink is doing. So OneWeb is also launching 600 telecommunication satellites into the orbit to cover all of the globe by telecommunication satellite. And also data analysis. So they are kind of map companies or AI analytics companies. So their expertise background is in AI or deep learning, but dealing with satellite data. There are also like a really unique startups as well. So on the bottom, there are service platform agent players are also existing. So if you take a look in the launch vehicles and satellites, satellite providers want to make a contract with launch vehicle company because they have to launch it. But there are not very many rocket services in your country, so you have to take a look at all companies worldwide. But it's very hard to contact them, and the information is not very much open. So here the service platformer will come in. So you have to talk to these kind of people, and they have networks with all kinds of launch vehicle players, and they'll help you to make a contract or launch. So this kind of a person is very important in this industry as well. And if you talk about industry, you have to think about money, finance as well. So if you think about who is supporting in the financial perspective these startups, so risk money is very important. Of course, space industry was supported by the governmental money historically, but I'll just keep talking. So thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Government money is limited. So to grow the industry in the worldwide scale, you have to find out other fund sources. And that's why we need venture capitals, risk money, or investors. And these diagrams show you that in the past few years, there is a big spike of the risk money. And the bubble depicts the size of the investment, and the vertical is a number of the companies who got invested from the venture capitals or other investors. So their number is growing. And of course, there are other number of startups who are not funded yet. So the size of the startups, number of startups are growing really rapidly as a whole. And if you talk about the size of money itself, it is also flourishing. So after 2015, there is a huge spike on it. There are kind of different reasons of this. One of them is that risk money has been invested to life sciences or drones or environmental energies. But their first round has been established, and then the investors' interest went into space, especially in Silicon Valley. And that's why the space industry got a lot of risk money. And also because Elon Musk made successful launches rapidly in these past few years, that actually attracted investors to get into the space industry. So the existence of hero functioned a lot to help out this industry. And I covered kind of a brief overview of the world new space trend. And I'm talking about how the new space is going on in Japan. So as I talked a little about the global scene, the US trend has brought by a few number of entrepreneurs, billionaires. But in Japan, we don't have that kind of heroes. So the new space trend in Japan is a little bit different from what's going on in the US or other Western countries. Okay, can you come back to the 3 points? So as I remember, one of the unique point of Japanese, thank you very much, Japanese space industry is still driven by the government. I'm not talking the government is leading or dominating, but they're supporting and make some great drive to make it as an industry. The second point is that Japanese space startups, the number is very few, small, but we have very unique startups among 30 to 40 Japanese space startups. And the last point is that we have different non-space industries coming into new space, and also corporate VCs or venture capitalists investing in space. So this is just a few of the notable space startups in Japan. Originally, the first generation of space startups came out from universities, like Tokyo universities or Kyushu universities. That was like before 2010, so early to middle 2000s. But the situation has changed after 2010. So second generation after 2010 has brought by the entrepreneurs who used to be the consulting firm, investment bank, so their background is kind of business person rather than scientists. And nowadays, today, we have very different kinds of backgrounds among entrepreneurs. Some of them from JAXA, some of them from conglomerates, or they used to be working on non-space industries. So we have a wide variety of entrepreneurs, and they're working on different kinds of businesses. I'll talk about it about what they're doing. And this is a kind of diagram sorting out the different startups in the different segments. So as I said, we have very different segments in one space industry. So as you can see, there's just a name of those startups. The biggest segment in Japanese space startup is space data. So how you should think about using space satellite data for the ground-based businesses. That is one of the core. I think this is all the same in the US and Europe as well. So satellite data sounds like really easy to monetize rather than going to Moon or Mars, right? So it is very easier for non-space people to get into the space. Many ICT people are very interested in doing space businesses. And also, of course, transportation is essential. Without this launch vehicle, you cannot deliver satellites into the orbit, right? And since US, India, Russia has a great power of the launch vehicles, we have relied on them. But as an industry, we need to have our own commercial vehicle. Well, that's why we have space launcher vehicle companies. But they're still under the R&D phase. So we hopefully to have the firm launch infrastructure in the future. You know, of course, space is not all about that. So there's kind of dreaming type of startups existing in Japan as well. Unique thing is that we have multiple numbers of startups in exploration field. So as I referred to iSpace, Moon Exploration Company, working together with NASA. Other than them, we also have different companies. Some of them are working on making robots. It could be work on the other planets. The technologies are based on haptics, AR, VR, and it's kind of like a real-time human motion mirroring robot. So if you put the gadgets on your body and move like this, robots will move in the same way. So this will lessen the cost of the human transportation to the space. Other than that, you can just take a robot to the moon and do some work. So this kind of like a really high-end disruptive technologies are being developed in this space. And majority of this slide is written in Japanese, so you may have a difficulty to read it. But this depicts the open innovation relationship between larger non-space companies and Japanese space startups. No, not only Japanese, but even US startups included as well. So the vertical are the segments of the different space industries. And the horizontal is type of partnership. So I would say the left is kind of much more casual, and the right is kind of much more serious. So for the left-hand side, sponsorship, partnership, doing kind of advertisement program with space startup, doing some space commercial on TV, something like that. If you go on to the right-hand side, some legacy company deal with their own space project. They're making their own satellite or dealing with the satellite data by themselves. But the majority of the partnership was made by partnership between startup and legacy company regarding investment. So legacy company invests into startup, although the legacy companies are not the space companies. So I'm talking about this tomorrow, but open innovation is one of the booming words among Japanese large companies, because our Japanese legacy companies are falling behind. One of the iconic cases is Sharp. So it was actually bought by your company, Honhai, 3 years ago. So legacy is no longer a strong player in the world economy. So they understand they have to make something new by relying on startups. And space is one of the fields that they think they can make something new for the global economy. And you may see, for example, ANA, All Nippon Airways, flying between Taipei and Haneda. They actually engaged in space. They are building the robot I mentioned earlier, the haptics robot. Also, they're investing in multiple numbers of space startups. So this is a very good example of non-space company investing into startups. And as a Space Sat Foundation, we actually got sponsored by ANA. Thank you very much for ANA. And the government is also taking a very important role to support this new space momentum. This is happening not only in Japan, but also US and Europe. NASA, ESA, JAXA is taking a very important role. So as an NRI consultant, I have supported the Cabinet Office. They are in charge of all of the space development policy in the nation. They have had discussed how they can commercialize space so far. However, it took a long time because they don't have any firm idea how they can monetize or industrialize it. But the thing has happened in the middle of 2010. In 2016, they launched a new law called Space Law, or Space Commercial Act. This actually regulates the space launch commercial activities, because space launching is very, very dangerous for the society, because if you fail, somebody may die, right? So you have to regulate the commercial activities for the startups in certain level. And then law was needed. Actually, I supported the government to make this law. And also, in the following year, the Cabinet Office also made a commercial guideline called Space Industry Vision 2030. So the 40-page government document outlined what the new space is all about. So it explains what's happening in Silicon Valley and what sort of industry is involved in new space and what sort of players should be expected to get into this new momentum. Within just the 40 pages, there are maybe over 50 times words that venture or startups was noted in this guideline. And after this Vision 2030, different government agencies started all kinds of space space business supporting programs. METI, Ministry of Economy, and CAO, Cabinet Office, and JAXA, they're all together doing different kinds of programs. One of the notable programs is called S-Booster. It is, where is it? Business contest. So you can see business contest between CAO and JAXA. We have a program called S-Booster. This is a business contest, open for public. So even individual or startup or legacy company, you can apply to the contest. If you won the prize, it should be 10 million yen will be delivered to the winner. So you can make your own startup with the money. And this year, S-Booster is the third year of the event. And in the past 2 years, we did this only in the country. But the third one is open for Asian countries. And although the application is already over, but I heard that there are many applicants from Taiwan as well. And this was the overview of Japanese new space. And I will just briefly cover each topic of each industry segment of the industry. So you might have heard about small launcher. I think Taiwan government is working on small launchers as well. This time? Yeah. So I think government in Taiwan is working very hard on making government small rocket. But in the world, small launcher is developed by the private companies. The leading company is Rocket Lab, based in the US, Los Angeles, as well as New Zealand, multi-nation company. And they actually made a very small rocket compared to the legacy company's launch vehicle. But it actually big enough to bring 10 or more satellites into the orbit with one rocket. So this is the actual size of a rocket, excuse me. So this is a human, and this is a rocket. The existing rocket is kind of 2 to 3 fold bigger than this small rocket. So this is very small compared to the existing ones. And in the middle, this is also a launch vehicle startup from Japan. And this person on the right, some of you may heard about person Takafumi Horie. He used to be one of the billionaires in Japan. He had a lot of issues and arrested one time. So after that, he's a normal person right now. But he has a huge passion about space development. And now he's investing his own money, pocket money, to his own startups to build a space startup. And the Vector on the right-hand side, this is a spin-off startup from SpaceX. So one of the founders of Vector used to be also a founder of SpaceX, working together with Elon Musk. So they're also building a small launch vehicle. These launch vehicles are very important because the existing bigger launch vehicle is very costly. So in terms of business industry, you cannot pay a lot, too much on the larger vehicles, right? So if you can have smaller, which is much cheaper than the existing ones, this will be really usable for industrial players. So the customer they're thinking about is not only government, but the non-space industry who want to have their own satellites, who want to operate their own satellite networks. Okay. So currently, about 1,500 satellites are being operated in the orbit. I heard that 4,000 satellites are in the orbit, but less than half of them are under the operation. And then the size of satellite, the size of satellites is also getting smaller, like launch vehicles. Because of the Moore's law, have you ever heard about Moore's law? The size of semiconductors will be getting smaller and smaller with the same quality time. Because of that law, semiconductors are really high quality enough for space industry as well. In the past, space, space infrastructures like launch vehicle or satellites were kind of really high-end technology were needed to make it. So you cannot make good use of ICT components you can buy on Amazon, right? But nowadays, you can make good use of those commoditized gadgets which you can buy on even in Amazon for making satellites and rocket vehicles. So that's why people can easily make satellites with a small size. And then many of these satellite startups are making that kind of really small satellites. We call it nanosats, small sats, depending on the size of satellites. The existing satellites which government are making like bigger than my body. But the new satellites built by these satellites is almost like my backpack, this size of it. So you can deliver the satellites with a small launch vehicle with a cheaper price because it's lighter than the existing satellites. And so this is a forecast of the number of the satellites in the future. So it's hard to see a little, but this is 2018, 19, and 20s. The number will be growing really rapidly. And there is also a kind of controversy. If you guys have too many satellites in the orbit, SDGs, you have to think about it. Sustainable development goals. So the term space debris is one of the social issues. We have to think about how we can sustain the environment of the space as well because there were too many satellites coming from Silicon Valley. And this is one of the notable instances of how ICT startups are dealing with satellite data. So this is the service done by one of the Silicon Valley startups called Orbital Insight. They are 100 employee company. Majority of them came from Google, Amazon, Facebook, those kind of internet giants. And what they're doing is AI, deep learning analytics. So as you can see on the right corner, this is oil tank. So the red circle is not original color. This was put by the AI. So it actually detects where the oil tank is are out, and it also detects the shadow of their rim, because oil tank is floating top. So depending on the amount of oil the tank has, the top floats go up and down. And because of that, shadow moves as well. And the AI also detects it as well. By using data of the sunlight, the time, location, and direction, you can estimate the actual height of the top of the oil tank. And then you can estimate together how much of oil exists in this oil tank. By using this technology, you can fully cover all kinds of areas in the world. So you can even detect the oil amount in the United States or North Korea for the military purpose. That kind of thing is like a feasible use of this kind of technologies. And this Orbital Insight has a lot of clients in the financial fields as well, governments. And they are really growing rapidly. And there are also unique startups out there in the world. Artificial shooting star. Have you ever heard about this? So shooting star is, of course, kind of natural phenomenon. But there is a startup in Japan trying to make human-made shooting star from a satellite, shooting some chemical stuff from the outer space to the Earth's atmosphere. They're doing their first experiment next year in Hiroshima. And they're also very similar type of technology. They're using similar type of technology, but they're doing, one of the startups doing space funeral, exerting your dead bones into atmosphere for your funeral. And space travel, this is kind of a traditional way of the space businesses. And there is some people who are thinking about making a hotel in the orbit. And this is actually happening right now. 3D printing in the International Space Station. So the company called Made in Space has a lengthy contract with NASA to bring them a printing service inside of the space station. So if you run out of some tools, like driver or something, you cannot bring from space right now, right? If you have a 3D printer and sending data from the ground to the space station, you can get easily the tools. That is happening right now in the space station. And they are actually from Silicon Valley as well. And also 3D printing meal. There are different companies in the world. Even in Japan, there are 3D printing sushi startup. They actually exposed in South by Southwest last year, and it was really popular then. So food in the space is very important for the astronauts. Eventually, we will have commercial astronauts or travelers in the business setting. And astronaut is kind of government officials, right? So they have to be trained as a Superman, and they have a very strong body and very smart mind, and they got salary from government to work on the space station. But from business space travel, your client, customer, travel to space, spending their money for their leisure. So we have to have good food, good environment. So that's why this kind of startup is needed. So food production as well. You want to cook it, right? Rather than just packed meal. And also, space station, as I said, is being faced with the tipping point. So as I said, after 2025, they might be privatized. So therefore, JAXA in Japan is working together with private companies to discuss how they can privatize the existing service they're working on in the International Space Station. Japanese module of the ISS is called Kibo. Kibo is the only outlet of the, exit of the ISS. If you want to go out of the ISS, you have to get into Kibo, Japanese module, even if you are the Americans or Russians. So therefore, they have a really good advantage because many people want to take their satellites into ISS first and send it off from the ISS to the orbit rather than making a rocket, because they have regular lines from the ground to ISS to send the astronauts and their food regularly from the Russia to the ISS. There are some rooms available for the private sector. Some people want to put the satellites into the vehicle to the ISS and send it over from the ISS. JAXA is doing that kind of business. But they're eventually forming that to the private sector. So two companies had a contract to JAXA to take over that lead. So as I said, not only Elon Musk, but also other players want to get into the other planets. One of the notable persons is Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon. He also has his own space startup called Blue Origin. Last month, he appeared into the public and talked about his own vision of the moon exploration called Blue Moon. He's now making his own moon rover to land on the moon to make a big factory on the moon surface. Because his vision is that human is kind of worsening the Earth's environment. That's why he thinks heavy industry has to transform into the moon surface rather than Earth's ground. And that's why he wants to make a factory to replace all of the heavy industry in the Earth. So there are also like asteroid mining. So the basic idea is how we can find out the energy resource in the outer space. And moon contains some water, could be used as energy, and some rare metals in asteroids So many people are aiming at kind of cultivating this kind of resources in these planets. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. So I'm open to the question and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sato-san, for the fruitful speech and sharing. So now we will proceed to the question and answer session. So anyone have a question, please raise your hand. 大家有什么对这个今天的主题上面有什么样的想多进一步的了解，都可以提出来。那这边我们可以请Sato-san这边做一个简单的说明。
In our member will translate if you talk in Taiwanese.
我这边有一个那个可以翻译，就是如果所以不用担心，你可以用中文问。
Thank you, Mr. Sato. We're good to know that your expertise on this field. My name is Chang from Taiwan, and I started up a new company in Taiwan called Heliox Cosmos. We're focusing on the CubeSat launch service. So I wanted to ask you about what's your observation from Japan or from Asia Pacific areas that Taiwan can play, what kind of role in this new space trend, and what kind of advantages that you think that would be a good collaboration with Taiwan and Japanese space industry? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chan. I'm kind of reluctant to say that, I regret to say that I don't know very much about Taiwanese industry, but I think in my image, Taiwan has very good technologies, especially in terms of manufacturing. And one of the problems that Japanese space startups are faced with is scaling. So they also have technologies to make something breakthrough. So making a CubeSat in a very smaller size. But if you want to make a constellation, I forgot to refer to what constellation is. That this is a large number of satellite system. So you have to rapidly manufacture satellites in large numbers. And startups don't have the huge factory. So if you have factory in a large scale with a cheaper price, startup will really feel helpful to work together. And if Taiwanese company can provide them with that kind of infrastructure, that will be helpful. One of the good example of that is, I referred to OneWeb earlier, the telecommunication satellite company in the US. They actually had a partnership with Airbus, the big, large aerospace company. What they're doing together is, the OneWeb is using Airbus factory, because Airbus is not only a space company, they're actually an airplane company. So they have different lines of components, rapidly making all kinds of components. So rather than Airbus as a space company, Airbus as airplane company, OneWeb working together with them to scale the number of the satellites, because they want to make 600. Did I answer to your question? Yeah.
First of all, thank you for your sharing today. I learned a lot. My company is helping SpaceX, helping their customer sourcing in Taiwan and manage the supply chain. And I was wondering, is there any certain kind of standard or system, like, for example, we see NetCap in aerospace industry, right? But how about space? Is there any kind of standard like ISO or NetCap, such kind of standard coming up, or?
I'm not very much following about it. Thank you very much for your question. So could you elaborate a little bit more why you are interested in that kind of topic?
Because we are helping them for managing the supply chain here, right? So we are not familiar. Okay, we are familiar with automotive. We're familiar with air flight, but nobody familiar with rocket or satellite. So we're looking for a
Understand.
certain kind of standard to follow.
I'm not expert on that kind of topic, but as long as I understand, the ISO or quality standard of the space industries are basically for legacy, established space industry. So if the quality standard is, how do I say that, pushed into the space industry, this is basically from the government, so government requirement. So most of the standards came from the government request. But if you work together with startups like SpaceX, I don't think there are kind of common standards of the quality in the industry-wide. Rather than that, each single company has their own standard. So this is a difficult point to work with the space startups. So you have to learn a lot about what they are thinking about. And you have to chat with them in technology aspects a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. So far, they don't have, they are creating their own standard. Yeah, you're exactly right. So so that's why I'm wondering, is there any, for example, like in Japan or in Europe, any standard that we can refer to?
Okay. I don't think there are like open quality standards to the public, even in Japan or Europe. But you can take a look at JAXA and the ESA's quality standard, but it's very demanding. So nowadays, for new space, I think government standard is a little bit too much for industries, because if you just want to follow this government standard, it should be really costly, too much, because government don't want to avoid any kinds of risks. That's why they are spending too much time and money on that. So we have to lessen the level of requirement, little by little. But there is no other like a firm standard for the industry.
Did you just mention JTEC?
And JAXA or ESA? ESA is European Space Agency. So JTEC or other like industrial agency might have something in space, but I don't think it's kind of real.
Thank you so much.
I know very hard to communicate with space startups, especially SpaceX. They're kind of, everything is secret. So they don't have even any IPs, patents. They don't submit any IPs to the agencies.
This is Alex from E3. I have one question regarding to your slide in page 16. You mentioned about the many companies in Japan and invest a lot in different segments. I have one question. What segment, for example, for the launch service or the manufacturing or ground equipment or the satellite service, what segment do you think it will be more potential to invest for the company not very big like Asia country, for example Taiwan or another country? This is my questions.
Thank you for your question. I think this is a very good question. So are you asking me as a kind of investor who want to invest in Taiwanese companies or Japanese companies? So who are you looking at?
Both. For the
Both.
investment or for research.
Okay, not as a risk money, but R&Ds. Okay. I want to say all, but it depends on the kind of time lengths that you want to get outcomes. So if you want to get outcomes, achievement really rapidly, I think satellite data is one of the best segments that you want to invest in for your R&Ds. But as an industry as a whole, as I mentioned earlier, you need to launch vehicles. And this is the hardest things for human to get out of the Earth. I don't know why we have to get out of the Earth, but satellites have to get out of the Earth. So this is the hardest point, technology-wise and money-wise and risk-wise. You may have a lot of mistakes and failures of the launch projects. So long run, you have to have your own infrastructures if you want to have your own ecosystem in the space industry. You don't want to rely on other countries, right? So, but the business is business. So many business players, even in Japan, are investing into satellite data analytics. So one of the notable programs in Japan is called TELUS. It is basically sponsored by the Ministry of Economy, METI. But the TELUS is actually organized by the large internet company called Sakura Internet. They are actually a crowd platform company from non-space industry. But they actually made a consortium with different companies like satellite companies, as well as trading companies or deep learning startups with like a 20 company consortium they made. And then because of that government platform dealing with the satellite imagery, the reputation of satellite data analytics become really flourishing in the country. And everybody started to think about how we can monetize satellite business. That actually is happening right now in Japan.
Any question?
If you don't have any question, I forgot to talk a little bit about my Space Study Foundation. Can I talk a little more about my foundation? Yeah, the following pages were for my own foundation. I forgot about this. I just put that yesterday. So, Space Study Foundation. So I'm now wearing a hat different from NRI. I'm a CEO of Space Study Foundation right now. So our vision is to accelerate new space of the globe in Japan. So Space Study is Tokyo-based, but our perspective is global mindset. And as I said, space industry needs to have all kinds of players from different people from the world. So not only the government, not only the major companies, we need also startups, legacy, the professionals from business scenes, and also young entrepreneurs as well. So we want to cover all the players as an ecosystem. And these are our objectives. So we want to lead the latest opinion in what's happening in the space industries. So if you are just based in Tokyo, you'll never know what's happening in Silicon Valley or other emerging countries in Asia. So we have to have open-minded everywhere in the world. And we want to connect players cross-nation, cross-country, cross-industry. That kind of thing is our objectives. And we want to create a new ecosystem, especially to Japan. And what we do is, basically we do annual conference. As I said, the next one will be July 9th in Tokyo. And this is annual conference. But in the meantime, we do also small activities, so-called lounge talk. This is kind of roundtable type of meeting, a meeting with 30 to 40 people in the evening of the weekdays, going to larger companies, open innovation hub, or this kind of setting, to chat with many people who are not currently in space industry, but who are interested in going into space. And then we label this as our sales promotion. So want them to the next following annual conference. And we also do startup pitch to promote new space startups for the public. And we actually started making our industry report called Space Study Compass. So volume 0, the preliminary version was already uploaded online. So if you want to take a look at it, just Google Space Study Compass and you'll find it. And the next one, volume 1, the real first version will be published at the very day of the Space Conference on July 9th. And these are our boards. I'm a CEO, so number 2 of this foundation. These 4 guys are from non-space industries. The guy on the left is working for a consulting firm like me, so we are actually competitors. And also we have venture capitalist and attorney, so they're all from other industries. But this is what space side is about. Non-space players are very important to create the new industry rather than legacy existing people. That's what we think very important. The co-founders, there are many space players. So many of them, some of them are really kind of iconic people in the new space momentum. This gentleman is a University of Tokyo professor. He is the father of the small sat of Japan. So he has a very huge power in the space industry in our country. And this person, Professor Shirasaka, used to be a student of Nakasuka, Professor Nakasuka, and he is also now have a huge power in the space industry. So luckily, we had a very great relationship with these people, as well as a very well-known space startup CEOs. They actually supported us to make this foundation. So we call them co-founders as a family. And this is our next conference. Should be on July 9th. Sorry, it's a very small words, characters. Should be in the area called Toranomon, very near from the walking distance from the government district. And this is also what we are about. So we actually got sponsored by non-space companies. This is very important. Like as I said, NA is one of our gold sponsors. This is in the middle. This is Sky Perfect JSAT, telecommunication and TV broadcasting company. And since SpaceX is satellite startup, so this is kind of really exceptional sponsors. But we also have, I think you can read Asahi Shimbun. This is one of the national newspaper, and JL, of course, airline, and Kyocera, manufacturing, and Melco is the only space company among our sponsors. So this kind of like consortium is one of our strengths. So we are supported by all kinds of industries. And this is for sales ticket, 6,000 yen. If you want to go to the network reception in the evening, 6,000 yen. So 12,000 yen in total if you have that kind of amount of money and good enough to have a time to fly to Tokyo, please join us. And we actually divided into 2 venues. And we have 11 panel discussions, as well as startup pitch and short presentations. We expect to have over 50 presenters, speakers from worldwide. And luckily, we haven't officially announced this yet, but we will have a Taiwanese startup as a speaker at this event called Odesseus Space, a member of the French Tech Taiwan Association. And we regularly have over 500 participants for each event. So this year, this is our 4th conference, but from the beginning, we have a lot of audience. So we both we are the first and the biggest space business conference in Asia. So this is kind of pictures that taken for the last conference. Is there any notable person? Well, anyway, we actually had Blue Origin from Seattle and other space startups then. And of course, many leading players from Japan as well. So these are kind of overview of the speakers. So this guy's from Blue Origin. And who else? This person used to be in the Obama administration working on the national space policy. So we actually invited these kind of persons. And he is now a director of JAXA. He is a former astronaut, captain of the ISS, Mr. Wakata. So I think he's the only person who used to be in the outer space among these speakers. And this is the kind of our attendees, the proportion of the attendees. So this is also what Space Science is about. We don't have majority people from the space field. Rather than that, we have people from business development, from non-space companies, or engineers in ICT fields, or entrepreneurs who want to make their own business in space in the future, or investors. Some people from space industry, from academia or government, and also students. So this kind of diversity is the thing that we really want to create in the space industry. So yeah, thank you for your time. So this is for the Space Tire Foundation. Thank you. Let's get back to the Q&A. Thank you.
还有其他的问题吗？刚刚的那个Satoさん的一些 speech， 还有可能其他的一些活动的部分。Okay, and then thank you very much for Sato-san. And then, actually, we will have a small token for today.
Thank you very much. I haven't expected about it. Thanks so much.
Just thanks again for his excellent speech.